On Shrewd and STEADFAST, we are going to talk about the gayest Star Wars. Because apparently that's a thing now. You have to fight for which Star Wars is the most gay. I didn't know that was something that was important, but apparently Disney is no longer trying to fight for family values. It's no longer trying to regain what it used to have in culture and society. It's just going full woke overlords. Then we're going to talk about Byron Donalds and how he might have said a faux pas. Maybe, maybe not. We'll break it down and whether his past actions will come back to bite him in the ass. Then we'll finish off with a story, an interesting story that I heard about a tiny village in Brazil. And this village in Brazil was completely cut off from the modern world and still mostly is, but they've been recently granted access to the internet. And that is now clearly a negative influence in their lives, as most of their citizens are now lazy, unmotivated, depressed, and fully addicted to internet pornography. But all of that and more on Shrewd and STEADFAST. So, before we break down any of the stories for this week, Dan, do you have any highlights for the past week of interesting things that you built or anything that you might have had going on in your life?
Not really. It's been storming here, so with bouts of losing power, getting power back, I've kind of been not down in the shop just because it does me no good to sit there and mess around with stuff with no power where I can't use my power tools. So it's been kind of a mundane week here.
Yeah. And as I mentioned at the start of the show, so good faith you went there for that. We're going to talk about the first, we're basically going to go with story by story. We're going to talk about the first story, and then we're going to open it up to the floor. So you can have your turn to speak. Just give us 5 minutes to break down the gayest Star Wars.
And also, we're going to be focusing the conversation on each particular topic until we're done with all the topics.
Yeah. We're going to try to be very focused and very selective. And try not to have massive deviations from our conversation like we did a couple weeks ago where we had a 20-minute conversation on movies. But let's break it down. So, from GameSpot, is the Acolyte the gayest Star Wars ever? Amandla. I didn't realize that was actually a name that people had. Amandla. Stenberg and creator discuss. So, the newest live-action series, which was released, I believe it was on Tuesday, has apparently been earning steadily high marks doing its fresh take on the Star Wars universe, but the show has been given a certain moniker that has confused showrunner Leslie Headland, quote, the gayest Star Wars yet. According to the rap, Headland and star Amandla Stenberg, who plays twins, explained how The Acolyte is, quote, far from the gayest Star Wars installment, how the franchise is pretty gay already. So, she says that people have told her it's the gayest Star Wars, and I'm frankly, and the other person responds, you're offended. And she says, no, I'm not offended. I'm into it. She continued with how she saw Star Wars as already pretty gay. I mean, if you've seen the fits, we'd be like, look how gay this is, and send each other reference photos. Of course, I would love to show you the video that is associated with this, but Twitter Spaces does not allow us to do that. And of course, she continues, are you telling me, quote, with a straight face that C-3PO is straight? She continued to joke and declared now that it's canon that R2-D2 is a lesbian. But this is apparently the direction that the showrunners for one of the biggest, I would hazard a guess, is the biggest franchise, maybe aside from Lord of the Rings. I still think Star Wars is bigger. The biggest sci-fi fantasy franchise of all time is going. And this has not been a sudden move in this trajectory. This is something which has been a gradual progression along in this direction. And I do not see what they hope to gain. I understand that they want the attention and they want the accolades from their supporters in terms of those on the Democrats and the left-wing side, but in reality, the primary viewers of Disney, and I notice how you're constantly lifting up your coffee mug, which is of course related to Star Wars, Dan. Haha, very funny. The
Hush now, I just like coffee.
the primary purveyors of Disney content are families and young children. And most families, at least the ones that are still strongly knit together, and the families that want to be showing their children good content, do not want to see this. That's why Disney has been steadily losing money. That's why Disney has continually been moving in a downward spiral in terms of profitability and in terms of outreach to other communities. This is a company that was once riding high as one of the most powerful empires known to man, and now it is crashing down. And of course, it was just kind of the icing on the cake that we get so many people referencing DeSantis versus Disney this week, and how he stood up to them and they caved in a spectacular fashion. But how do you feel about this, Dan?
Well, I'm a lifelong fan of the franchise. I have been ever since I saw the original VHS tapes, grainy and unperfect as they were, and they were amazing. So for me, this is really a slap in the face, because Star Wars has supposed to be, you know, for families to see and everything. And there were definitely allegories of different topics and heavy topics throughout the franchise. I mean, you look at the Empire, you look at even in the newer movies, the First Order. So there was definitely deeper material in it. But I'm sorry, droids just don't have sexuality. Those are not the droids you're looking for. It's ridiculous.
I should hope not.
Well, and on top of this, they know nothing. These people know nothing. The guy who's the main male character sat there and thought that Anakin is the one who blew up the Death Star, showing that they don't even know their own source material.
Oh, I didn't actually so the showrunner. Is this like one of the actors of the show?
Yes. Wow. Charlie Barnett.
Wow. That's crazy.
For those of you who've seen Chicago Fire, he was Peter Mills in the first 3 seasons. Okay. And I actually liked him in that show. Now it's kind of hard to go back and watch because he's such an idiot. But look, all they had to do was make great television. Look at Andor. Look at The Mandalorian, though it has been going downhill.
The first 1.5 seasons, I guess.
Yes. First couple seasons were great. Look at the animated Rebels, Clone Wars. They have the ability to make great television, but they're throwing it all away. And the audience scores on Rotten Tomatoes, some of that could be review bombing, but they've been discounting a lot of reviews. So a lot of that negative sentiment is probably people who actually, unlike myself, watched it, because I will not watch this one. I'm kind of over it. And that's saying something, because I've been into this and I have a lot of the games. I have tons of books, and it's sickening. Oh yeah, not sickening. It's infuriating that they would try and destroy this just like they're doing with Marvel.
Oh yeah, I'm still a big Star Wars fan, and I love the lore and the expanded universe behind it, because I don't know, it's one of the only universes aside from I'm in Star Trek and Star Wars where you can have decent stories conveyed in a fantasy and sci-fi context, and I appreciate all of the extra elements that they add and a lot of the interesting stories which they blend into the mix, and some of them are blended in quite well, and then they try and make it so that it's not just telling human stories and stories about values and stories about morality and virtue. Like, that was one of the first things that I really, really appreciated about Clone Wars, in that every single episode of the Clone Wars would have a virtue or would have a morality which they would convey at the start of every episode. And this is a complete rejection of that. This is not something you can watch with your family anymore. This is now something in which you have to be concerned about indoctrination to put your children in front of something which is now labeled Star Wars.
Well, and one thing that's interesting is they're bringing up like Juhani from the game Knights of the Old Republic was supposedly a lesbian. Mm-hmm. Well, I played that game multiple times, and if she was,
I think it's not.
If
Knights
she
of the Old
was,
Republic, I
it
think
was
it's Old
just.
Republic. I think it's the massive multiplayer variation of it.
Possible, but like I said, if she was, it was very crafted in there to where it wasn't overt. Because that as soon as I saw that, I'm like, what, really? I'd never even noticed that. So I don't know, it's what we're going to have to deal with in the future. We're going to deal with more of it, and all we can do is not consume the content.
Yep.
And hurt their pocketbook.
Yes. But now we can, as I stated earlier, Dan and I have had our 2 cents input on it. So, of course, anybody who wishes to comment on this story, and we can go back and forth for a few minutes before we break down into the next take of the week. And I tried to let Good Faith up, but I don't know what happened to him. Twitter
so
Spaces,
did I. I don't know if he...
I don't know. Sometimes Twitter Spaces just have some random issues with connectivity. I'll send him a request, just because I know that he was trying to connect. Of course, if anybody else wants to discuss Disney or Star Wars or any form of indoctrination that they're trying to bring on and introduce to our children at a young age, then you are, of course, more than welcome to do so. Otherwise, we will jump on to the next story, which is about Byron Donalds. And that's going to be a fun talk. Just great.
He stepped in it.
Yes, but it is a stepping of his own creation. Because it wouldn't have been such a massive turd if he hadn't done what he did several months ago. But apparently nobody in this group, unless we're having connectivity issues again, can anybody let me know, maybe little thumbs up or waves, to let me know that the space sound is going well? I do not want another issue like we had on Tuesday, Tim. Not seeing any little waves right now. It could just be my...
There we go, Bonk did. Oh, Jess has requested. I'll get her up
go. Here. Okay. All right. And
what's up?
Oh, Good Faith is what?
Yeah, you sent him the invite. The space is acting a little wonky.
All right. Is Jess in Good Faith? How is the connection wrong, or is?
I mean, it's not bad.
Fine
it's not
to
bad.
me.
We can hear you, but
yeah.
It's glitching out a little bit to an extent, but it's good in general.
Okay, I'll take it.
So.
The only thing is, I would say, Shrewd, you sound like far away to me. Is that
okay? I thought I fixed this. Give me one.
Is my mic okay?
Happening again. All right. I thought I had set this up earlier.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I hear you.
My bad. We're all good now.
Perfect.
Oh, much better, much better.
Perfect.
You.
All right.
Hey, let's get Bonk up here, okay?
I don't think Bonk wants to talk about Star Wars.
Yeah, I don't. I'm going to be honest. I don't know much about Star Wars. It's not my thing. So I just know that Disney is woke and they stink. And
does Milo like Star Wars?
A little, I guess. He watched the Clone Wars or whatever that show was, whatever it was. But he doesn't like the new stuff.
I
find he doesn't really. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I find that like the older Star Wars content, there'd be a bad episode every now and then, but for the most part, it was very solid, consistent content. And nowadays, it's 50% of their show lineup is either truly terrible, and then you have mediocre, and then the rare absolute gem. And Dan and I will totally 100% agree on this. The last gem that they released for Star Wars was Andor. It had acting and drama that you would never expect from a space opera like Star Wars.
The guy, I'd have to look his name up. The actor that played the bureaucrat. Oh man, his whole mannerisms, everything was amazing.
Oh,
If I'm not mistaken, isn't there like Star Wars Senate or something like that?
there is a Senate in the extended Star Wars universe, yes.
Okay, so how does the government structure work in the Star Wars universe?
The government structure would be, what would it be akin to? Because it's a whole like there's no parties. It's just a whole bunch of senators and then one
I think
person
it
who is.
switches.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it
thought it
does
was kind of
switch.
like a republic, but they kind of switch around.
So like the Roman Republic, kind of.
Yeah, that would probably
Yes.
be the best way of referring to it. would be
Okay,
the Roman
okay,
Republic.
that makes sense.
And then, of course, the Empire dictators, and different ones. There's all sorts of strife, and there's a lot of things that were brought in by different authors, George Lucas and everything. It wasn't just straight up, well, this is Star Wars. It was, look, you can see this different area where it represents like, okay, the Roman Republic, and the fall represents kind of like the downfall of the Roman Republic and different things. So they brought in a lot of subjects. It's a very complex universe when it comes to some of the things they try to mix into it.
Okay, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Nickel and Dime, you recently came up to speak.
Yes, I heard there's a Star Wars conversation going on. I was just wondering what.
You just wanted to put in your nerd card. It's okay.
Well, I'm more than happy to stamp his nerd card.
I'm Gen X. Saw the Return of the Jedi for my 8th birthday party. So.
Wow.
Okay, did you watch Clone Wars?
Well, yeah. You mean the series or the movie?
The series, the cartoon, the shows, little shows.
Well,
yeah.
there is both the movie and there is the series. The movie is
Yes,
not great.
the series.
The series is quite good.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a snob when it comes to Star Wars. I'm kind of original trilogy, theatrical release only. Nerd, but George Lucas ruined Star Wars long before Disney did. They just kind of said, "Hold my beer," and
made it
went to
much
town.
worse. Yeah, I was the opposite from you because I'm millennial, and The Phantom Menace came out when I was 7, and so I came from a different generation. And while I now look back and I enjoy certain aspects of the prequels, and I don't enjoy other aspects of it, I sort of see the good and the bad for what it is, because I never had that I didn't have the nostalgia goggles of the original trilogy, because I saw them essentially about 2 or 3 weeks before The Phantom Menace came out, and of being 6 and 7, you don't fully understand a lot of the character interaction and the dichotomies that you would understand.
I like the original Yoda. I liked the old Yoda. The original Yoda from the older series, he was way funnier.
By the time The Last Jedi came around, you guys and the millennials were like...
Oh, I think you muted yourself before you finished your point there. I think you were going for that we millennials were like, see what they did to Star Wars?
See, okay, so I think mine was like I saw the original 3, but I didn't I saw the later 3 also too. I don't know. I did see them all kind of in order or whatever. I didn't have that nostalgia. I don't know just really wasn't into it, not my thing. But like, I'm not into Star Trek either, or whatever. Like, it's just I'm not into the sci-fi thing as much. But like, I did like the original Yoda character. I did like, the Jabba the Hutt stuff from the original. Like, I thought that was interesting. Stuff like that. And I also like the older ones. Everybody goes like gets all nasty about Jar Jar Binks, but I thought that was actually like the way that they sort of structured that society and stuff like that. I thought that was interesting. And I
Jar
thought
Jar
that like
Binks.
people were being so mean to him. I didn't understand that.
Jar Jar Binks is the definition of a useful idiot.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean he is,
Okay.
but I think that was the kind of the point. I just think that everyone's just kind of like me, like they were claiming it was racist and all this stuff, and I was like, I don't know, I didn't see that. I saw it as like it was sort of a more primitive society compared to the people on the other side or whatever, and so they had this like they didn't really like each other kind of thing. And so I don't know if you had to call it racist. I guess they could say it was Native American racist. I don't know, but
Well, I believe
I never
that
really got it.
I believe that they said that they were modeling him after like a very stereotypical Jamaican. But that was what
Okay.
I think I heard that somewhere.
Sorry, the mute button glitched. Like I was pressing mute and it wouldn't let me unmute. That was just so weird. That's right in my punchline. Right on my punchline. That was ruined the whole
Yes,
thing.
it just ruined your
the
whole thing. And I was like,
Everything is
did you?
Yeah. So it's just yeah. So when Disney ruined everything, the millennials come, prancing out, saying, see, it's not so bad. Don't you wish you had the prequels now? And I'm like,
Don't you
no,
wish
no.
you had what we
What?
had? Bonk, you have your hand up, and apparently you're showcasing your nerd paraphernalia with a Vader helmet.
Yeah, I heard you're like, why would Bonk want to talk about Star Wars? And I'm like, where the fuck did you get that idea from? So I'm putting up a few
Bonk,
things.
yeah,
I'm putting
tell
up a
us.
few things. I'll put them up in the nest. But no, I've got one of Vader's screen used helmets from Empire.
Oh,
That art piece that was custom made, and I'm about to put up a custom portrait that Carrie Fisher uh, um, um, commissioned. She had 3 of them made. One of them belongs to the Mayhew family. Peter Mayhew, of course, was Chewbacca.
yeah.
One belongs to me, and one belongs to the founder of Funko.
Oh, damn.
No, I'm in Star Wars.
Well, he's an OT like me. He's an OTer like me. So
Wow.
But
That's
point
puts me to
of
shame,
fact
Bonk.
for what I was hearing as listener, the actor didn't say Anakin destroyed the Death Star. The actor twice said Anakin killed a Death Star.
Oh boy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you are correct. I did misquote that.
Meaning he didn't even know it was an object. He thought it was like a death claw from
he thought it
Fallout.
was a thing.
Also, I suffered through the first episode of Acolyte just to laugh at it.
Oh boy.
You will be pleased to know that every Jedi is either a woman or a person of color or a woman person of color. And throughout the entire first episode, the only white male with a speaking line is a prisoner.
Oh no.
oh, the green Jedi, the bald green one. She is actually the lesbian wife of the producer.
Oh, great.
Nepotism.
Yeah.
It's so much
And they're all
worse than
like,
we thought.
yeah. Kathleen Kennedy can do any worse. I mean, and just when you think it can't get any worse.
Then it will.
But here's what's crazy is this show was canceled like 5 times. And then
Mm-hmm.
she finally willed it to happen. I don't know what she has. I don't know what kind of strings she has. I mean, other than she was Steven Spielberg's protege for, 40 years. I don't understand the pull that she has at Disney and why they can't get rid of her. I mean, clearly she's pandering to the wrong people. Like she's taken Star Wars to a demographic and thrown it in their face, and they just don't want it. Like lesbians and women and people. They don't want it. They don't give a shit. It's not for them. It's for nerdy dudes that want to see women in metal clad bikinis.
That's certainly one of the Star Wars fans that you would be referring to? Was a
You
certain
know,
type?
yeah.
It's for 30, 35 and under, boys.
Okay, it is she did look really good in that bikini.
Yes.
So,
I will agree with that. I have
Wait, hold on a second. Who you guys talking about?
Carrie Fisher,
Carrie
Return of the
Fisher?
Princess
Jedi,
Carrie
Leia.
Fisher.
metal bikini.
Oh, okay.
Have you
Went
The
to
seen?
Princess
Okay,
Leia. Oh
good
my
faith.
goodness.
You are okay. You are a representative from Gen Z, and we're calling upon you in this moment of need. What Star Wars content have you seen so far?
I mean, I think I saw the first movie a while ago.
Okay, what do you define as the first movie?
What is the first movie?
Yeah, there's more bad Star Wars than there's good now,
Hold
so.
on, no. It was the Disney Plus series, right? With the Yoda.
Oh,
Baby
Oh,
Yoda.
jump off a cliff.
The
No,
Mandalorian.
Yeah, the Mandalorian. Correct.
Oh no.
Oh, that's
no.
not the first movie, dude.
That is not a movie. So
Well,
you
I
haven't
mean,
seen
to be
any
honest-
of the you haven't seen any of the saga.
That is a saga. What are you talking about?
Well, no, that's a TV series.
No, the
There are-
original movies.
The
It's a
original
TV
movie.
show that's a spin-off.
Yeah, it's a spin-off. The original movie was released in 1977. And
1977.
yes, my
Yeah.
dad watched it when he was like 13.
Wow.
My dad watched it.
Yes. I'm a millennial.
Yeah, I'm sorry that we're
You'd be
younger
like
than
30.
you, nickel and dime.
I am
Yeah.
32. Yes.
I just realized I'm as old people.
Sometimes that comes as a
It's-
shock. Yes.
You know, like when I sit there and I talk to people, and like all of a sudden, like, all my references for celebrities and stuff are nothing that anybody. Like I talked to Good Faith about Angelina Jolie, and he had no idea who she was.
Wow.
Listen,
Which
the
is
world
so
changed
weird.
for whatever reason. For whatever reason, the world changed with the iPhone. Like there was great movies and content, and there was great music up until 2008. I don't know what happened. I don't know what changed. It was like the last great year of decent movies, and things just went off the fucking rails when the iPhone came out.
Well,
Ever
'cause-
since then,
well,
it hasn't been the same.
and we will talk about that as in our last story section that we're going to
Yeah.
do tonight. But we'll move on for now, and of course, at the end of the show, when we transfer from video stream and Twitter Space to just Twitter Space, we will open up the floor for more discussion on those types of topics. But for right now, we're going to switch to our second story of the night, which is talking about Byron Donalds and the faux pas that he made about Jim Crow. So, from the Philadelphia Inquirer, Byron Donalds came to Philly and said black families were stronger during the Jim Crow era. Now, he's in apparently trouble in D.C. So in his struggle to fend off the furor he caused after suggesting black families were stronger under Jim Crow segregation at an event in Philadelphia aimed at helping the GOP reach black voters, a frustrated Byron Donalds told CNN Wednesday, "Let's agree on something. I am, obviously one of the better communicators in the Republican Party. Others, many others it turned out, appear to disagree." So the backlash against Donalds, whose comments were first reported by the Inquirer on Tuesday night, has been swift and relentless. So fierce is the vitriol, in fact, that a spokesperson for Donald Trump stressed in an interview Thursday, "Please make it clear this was this was not said in an official Trump event." And of course, he has been named as a potential running mate for Trump as he searches for a VP candidate. So, what did he say exactly? So the quote is, "You see, during Jim Crow, the black family was together. During Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative. Black people have always been conservative-minded, but more black people voted conservatively. And then HEW, Lyndon Johnson, you go down that road, and now we are where we are." And of course, he's referring to Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs, which expanded social services. So, these comments came from during a Congress cognac. I can't pronounce that word today.
Words are hard.
Words are hard. Cognac. And cigars featuring Donalds and United States Representative Wesley Hunt. And of course, both are conservative, quote unquote, black Republicans. So, how do we feel about this, Dan? I'll let you take the first crack at this one.
Well, we talked a little bit earlier. Thomas Sowell talks about stuff like this, but yet he is actually a better communicator. Byron Donalds was definitely far out in the weeds when he talks about being one of the better communicators. Thomas Sowell, when he talks about this, one, he doesn't levy some of that conversation just at black people. He talks about how all families were better off when it came to being more complete and having less issues back in that time frame before social programs. And he doesn't sit there and frame it under as a Jim Crow-ish or a Jim Crow deal. So I think Byron Daniels may, and I'll give him the tiniest benefit of a doubt, even though he doesn't really deserve it, in my opinion, have been trying to make a good point. He just has absolutely, I think, no clue how to do that. But if you look at his past and you look at things he said in the past, it's also partly just the way he is. And that's ignorant at times.
Ignorant at times. That would be one of the better ways to describe, one of the more merciful ways to describe Byron Donalds would be ignorant at times.
Yeah, what's kind of your take before I open the floor back up?
Sure. Well, my take would be very similar to what you were presenting, in that, yes, society in the 1950s and prior generations, it was more conservative. You had more of a family-oriented structure, and of course, this is what we've constantly harkened back to as what conservatism is. We look back at these basic fundamental building blocks and units of society and say, hey, this is what worked in the past, we're going to refer back to it, and we do not want to go into this unknown tomorrow because we're not utopians. We like to see and harken back to what has worked. And that is what he's trying to do, but he does so in a way that completely ignores all the issues of Jim Crow. It's just like, oh, well, yes, the black family was more conservative and they were better off during Jim, and they were more united as a family. It's like, okay, yes, but remember, society is not all that bright. They nominated the two least liked and most hated candidates in modern memory. And so you can't just spout things off without any point of reference. You can't just put these comments into the void and expect that people are going to understand them 100% and they're going to fully understand the context by which you're putting them forth. And then not to mention that within the past year, Byron Donalds used a very similar tack when he was going after DeSantis regarding the whole issue with the education system and the several small lines that were referring to, while slavery was horrible, some individuals did learn useful skills that helped them later on in life. And we're not trying to say at all that slavery was a good thing. There was a lot more context provided from the Florida Department of Education and from DeSantis, and yet Byron Donalds joined with Democrats like Kamala Harris and those that are in the squad amongst the Democrat House to attack DeSantis along really poor lines of attack, but simply because he was running against Trump, Byron Donalds used that. And so now he sort of has to sit in his own filth because he came for himself. He was not willing to look and see that other people were presenting this in a fair-minded manner. He was simply going for the attack. And I'm willing to give Byron Donalds, I don't think he was trying to say that blacks were better off during Jim Crow. Of course he's not trying to say that, but because he didn't provide context, you obviously have to say, okay, Byron, you were dishonest in the way that you attacked others, you're sort of getting your comeuppance, and that other people are not using the context to attack you.
Yeah. Yeah, he just needs to take the L on that one. All right, I'm going to open up the floor here.
Jess Squared, you have your
Jess,
hand up.
Okay.
Jess? She sort of dropped out there for a second. Dan, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Okay, I can't hear Jess.
Hey guys, it
Oh,
seemed like you guys muted me. Like it literally
nope.
seemed like it just did like a mute thing, and I was like, "What is going on? I'm muted."
Yeah, nobody wants to hear from Jess.
Interrupted me to mute me. Nobody wants to hear me. I know. So what I was going to say, lest you give Byron Donalds the benefit of the doubt, you'd understand. Like, okay, number one, he went after DeSantis over a benchmark that of an entire curriculum that basically said that because these people learned that slaves had learned skills in the as slaves, right? They had blacksmithing, they learned blacksmithing skills, etc., etc. Afterwards, they then were able to use those skills to their benefit in order to. That doesn't mean that that was a good thing. It means that they persevered with the skills that they had. They used those that they had developed. That's just perseverance. That's just overcoming. And that's what it was saying. So I find that fascinating that he is expecting all this nuance when he said, oh, blacks were better off during Jim Crow, basically. And that kind of, I'm sorry, I don't give grace to that. And number two, if you really think that Byron Donalds is like, oh, go look into a little bit about, some things that may have been scrubbed about his past. Just a little thought. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's got a pretty bad past. But the thing is, what I was saying, my whole point was that I'll give him the slightest benefit of the doubt that he actually was trying to make a valid point. I just really won't step in to defend him that hard because of all the things he's done in the past. Bonk.
Yeah, so I think everybody's missing, kind of a sneaky play. I think this is all 4D chess. Listen.
Oh gosh.
So everybody knows.
Oh, good lord.
So everybody knows.
Listen.
Yeah. Everybody knows that the way to get the most money right now is to hit your wagon and bag. Right. That's how you get your cash. But however, what if these politicians are smart enough to know that if they hitch the wagon too tightly and then get attached to his ticket, right, because he has no chance of winning, that's the end of their careers. So the 4D chess here is that nobody actually wants to be his vice president, so everybody that he's considering shoots themselves in the foot on purpose, right? So Kristi Noem kills a dog in a gravel pit, and Byron Donalds does this thing with Jim Crow stuff. These are all ways to get them taken off the VP list. So what if this is all just 4D chess, man?
Oh man.
See, but the fact that he did it in his normal, as Reese likes to say, the annoyingly relaxing voice, made that so much worse.
Oh, it was hilarious. But wow, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, and then to offer a counterpoint to whatever that was, good faith.
I mean, to be honest and to be fair, right, I don't think Byron Donalds has any credentials, right, to become vice president. I think this was more pandering to appeal to black voters who might not necessarily vote for Trump with the margin that many people are expecting, right? I think Trump should actually double down on independence and people that live in the suburbs that would be potentially open to voting for a Trump ticket. I don't think what Byron Donalds and Wesley Hunt are doing right now is constructive in any way, shape, or form. I mean, to disagree with what Bonk said, I think it's an honor to become President Trump's vice president, right? Because, I mean, to an extent, it advances your career. And that's why you see all these talented young politicians, those J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, actually going out to Trump's courtroom appearances, right, and batting up for him. You see Doug Burgum doing the same because they actually have this yearning to be on the Trump ticket.
Yearning. So
Yeah.
Well,
good
Burgum,
good
part of
what?
Burgum's deal here,
Yeah, go ahead.
is because part of Burgum's deal, because I moved to Texas from North Dakota, is the whole state was so tired of him, they put in term limits. So that's why Burgum's all in doing this.
Yeah, and my response is, so what happened with the former vice president, and did that advance his career?
Mike Pence. I mean, Mike Pence is a traitor, right? It's the movement. Okay, you could laugh.
Well,
but,
that's what's going to be
more importantly, you said that Byron Donald doesn't have the credentials to be vice president, but Trump doesn't have the credentials to be president, so it works.
According to what? He's a former president. What are you talking about?
Well,
yeah, and he didn't have the credentials in the first place.
Yeah, Franklin Pierce was a former president. James Buchanan was a former president. Grover Cleveland was a former president. We've got Jimmy Carter was a former president. We've got a long history of former presidents that weren't qualified to do shit.
What's wrong with Grover Cleveland and Franklin Pierce, Bonk?
I don't think we're here for the lesson.
Jesus Christ, Franklin Pierce until Biden came along was the worst president in our country's history.
Franklin Pierce expanded the country. What are you talking about? Their manifestation.
Franklin Pierce actively attempted to start the Civil War, and then when he lost his re-election bid, he got drunk, stole a horse, and driving the horse while intoxicated, ran over and killed a woman, and then later his own party accused him of treason.
Yeah,
but he expanded the country, though, Bonk.
Wait, Bonk. That would just mean he should be a modern politician.
So good faith is right. He did expand the country, but he didn't do it for the purposes of expanding the country. Again, his goal was to cause the Civil War. He wanted it to happen. So he started.
There were disputes about slave states, right?
So it had nothing to do with slave states. What it was, the Western expansion projects. This is what caused the Civil War. Ultimately, James Buchanan tried to fix it, but by then the wheels were already too much in motion. Buchanan gets blamed for the Civil War way too much, but he at least spent his presidency trying to avert it. Pierce's idea for the Western expansion project was to get the legislature to forbid any contracts for the Western expansion to go to anybody that was going to use slave labor. So the North was industrialized,
but I think
thus the North was going to get all of the contracts, and the South wasn't going to get any of them. He knew what that result was going to be. Anyway, this is neither here nor there. It doesn't have anything to do with the fact that Trump joins a pantheon of other completely inept individuals who should have never been allowed within 500 feet of the White House.
Yep. Let's go to Nicola and sorry, Jess.
I was just going to say, you say that it's going to be good for whoever's career. I would disagree with you because the evidence clearly indicates that it wouldn't. If there's any, the fact that you call Pence a traitor.
Well, I mean, it's an honor in itself, right? To hold the office of vice president is not an honor just to be vice president.
The only reason, what I'd say is the only reason why these people is they don't view themselves as being able to be successful, be president themselves through any other means. So they would want to be vice president as that kind of opportunity.
Well, I mean, they
might seek it because that is the highest office that they think they.
Yeah, but Mike Pence was more of a choice picking for the purpose of expanding the electoral coalition, right? He wasn't picked as an heir to the MAGA movement in any way, shape, or form. And I think what Trump's going to do in 2020, he's going to pick a successor to lead the party during 2028.
I don't think the mute all button is working, Dan.
What'd you say, Shrewd?
He's trying
what
to use
is going
the mute
on? I keep getting muted.
I'm trying to mute everybody, and somehow good faith is immune.
He just keeps talking.
There's Gen Z immunity.
All right. And that means if he's still talking when I mute everyone, I'll end up dropping him down. But Nick, we're going to go to nickel and dime,
and then we're going to go to our final topic,
and then we can. Then everybody can. It can devolve into whatever.
To their greatest and most I don't even know.
But
Nickel
yeah,
and dime, please take it away so I don't have to keep stammering.
Oh my God. Okay. We were talking about Byron Donalds' gaff, right?
Yes.
So,
yes,
what I find it ironic is how they feign outrage at, oh my God, they learned a skill and used it. And then the very next Black History Month, they're like, look at these millionaire former slaves. You know, it's just like they bought land and worked the land. And where did they learn how to do that? And listen, nobody says that anybody's thinking that slavery had a good aspect to it. But when you're a people in a survival mode and you're tasked with doing things on a farm, it's not inconceivable that they learned from what they observed and translated it into successful skills once they were let go, right? So it just amazes me how they want to just use it for politics and not really like, in spite of slavery, they became successful based on what their experience.
Yes. And that's what we should be that's what should be focused on. And that yes, the Jim Crow era was not a good time for the black community. It was not a good time to be black in America or Canada for that matter. But despite that, despite the hardship that they faced, the families that were formed in the black community, just as the families that were formed in many other communities, were more tightly knit, and they were more unified around the family structure than they are now. And much of that has to do with some of the things that he mentioned about the Great Society projects. And a lot of it has to do with the way that our culture is oriented around family. Our culture is encouraging us to move away from the nuclear family. It's encouraging us to move away from having a mother and father and just to see sexual interaction as dang it, struggling to find the word. It's just an exchange. It's just the culmination of an entertaining evening. There's no more significance, there's no more emotional or spiritual connection that you form with someone through intimacy. There's no encouragement of family and social structure and the development of units that can both grow together and enhance each other, but also the raising up of the next generation. Like even several weeks ago, Bonk and I were talking about the importance of family and the importance of legacy. These were important concepts to everyone in that generation of Americans. And now, in our modern culture, throughout North America and throughout the Western world, the family and the entire pursuit of where people put their focus is so skewed towards selfishness, towards egotistical pride, and towards pleasuring yourself before anything else. And that's one of the major reasons. And of course, the entire aspect, and I know that some people will disagree with this, but the sexual revolution and the introduction of abortion on demand has made children and family seem only like a detriment, and it's only seen as something which is dragging families down, instead of seeing children and the family unit as something which is holding up society and which actually did keep Western society great for so damn long.
and that is a great segue into our final article.
Yes, it actually is. So let's talk about this one. So this is a story from, entertainingly enough, it is a Canadian news network called Global News. So remote Amazon tribe hooked to the internet hooked on the internet thanks to Starlink. So in today's digital age, almost everyone is connected, and now thanks to Starlink, that even includes remote tribes in the Amazon rainforest. So most of the world has had decades to grapple with the repercussions of the internet. Groups like those living in the Amazon's indigenous villages are playing catch-up to combat screen distractions, digital misinformation, and pornography addiction. So Starlink's 2022 entry into Brazil made the high-speed digital connection possible. The SpaceX product has been established internet in remote locations around the world. And some of the village elders in this community... I skip a portion of it. Okay, so they took this and they went into a section of the Amazon rainforest, which is known as the Barubo villages, and they witnessed firsthand how the indigenous tribe struggles with maintaining traditional culture while connecting to the rest of the world online. Within months, the younger generations have been less interested in the traditional ways of life. They've become lazy, and according to the New York Times, they're learning the ways of the white people, which I find is entertaining and silly. So, Inoke Marubo, because everybody has the same surname in that village, a leader of the tribe, is a leading advocate for internet access. Still, he noted that internet was initially detrimental, and still is, specifically for the tribe's hunting and fishing regimen. With so much to peruse online, no one wanted to do the work. So now they've agreed to implement limits to internet access. It's only available 2 hours in the morning, 5 hours in the evening, and on Sundays. And so one of the interesting aspects is the tribe's traditional culture frowns on public displays of affection, like kissing, but apparently now many of the young boys and young men are sharing sexually explicit videos in group chats. So the issue of internet access has triggered bitter disputes amongst the political leaders, with arguments both for and against them. Ugh. That's interesting. And we were having this discussion prior to the start of the show, in that you have a culture that is completely separated from the rest of the world, and this is, of course, a fantastic case study in what happens when you have a culture that is entirely unfamiliar with addictive presences, which we are now completely numb to their presence. We're numb to the presence of social media. We're numb to the presence of, well, we're not numb to the presence of things like porn, but we have adopted strategies to counter it. We've adopted strategies to speak on it and to encourage others not to pursue this. But to have a culture which has no basis on function how to resist these impulses and resist these urges, and immediately when you give them something as intoxicating and as attractive as the internet and unlimited access to media and entertainment and information, then of course they're going to be instantly addicted to this, because why wouldn't they be? It's like the old idea of, I'll invent a time machine and I'll bring an iPhone to, say, the early 1900s, and what will happen? Now, of course, they won't have access to the internet, but there will be an immediate change, especially if you introduce it to the masses, immediate change in how that society responds to new technology. And while we were introduced to these things gradually, like those of us in mine and Dan and Jess's era and age group, we were introduced to the internet via the ever-annoying dial-up connection sound, and you had to be disconnected from the phone line to actually turn on the damn internet. And now, over 25 years, we've adapted to this. We've adopted this way of life, and now it's something which is completely normal for us. But this is a society that has no understanding of all of these concepts, and of course, they're going to be immediately susceptible to all of it. But Dan, I'll have you give your say, and then we'll jump in and go into free for all.
We talked about this earlier, and I mean, it doesn't surprise me what has happened. It doesn't one bit. I mean, you start introducing all sorts of entertainment, and even outside the porn issue. You're all this entertainment, all this information. They want to digest everything, and of course, the younger people wanting to go now, and they want to leave. it's you got good things, you got bad things, because now they have access to more education as far as new concepts, new ideas. They can get help quicker, because that article also talked about if someone gets bit by a venomous snake, they can get help a lot faster than relayed by radio. But it's going to happen. It's just happening to them all at once. And the deal with the porn is that, of course, they're curious. And unfortunately, is compressing 25 years or so of all of this into just a matter of months or whatever. It's a huge shock. God, could you imagine? Honestly, could you imagine not knowing anything outside of your village, hunting, fishing, and next thing you know, you can go sit there and shoot Nazis on Wolfenstein. You can, all of this, and that's what they're having. Constant, playing video games all the time, everything. But the porn issue is like to go from a society where everything is like they are much more conservative than even we are, even taking out the worst aspects of our society, where they don't even want to even kiss in public. And now all those kids are like, so this is what happens. And yeah, it's unfortunate, but they'll have to figure that out. That it's an interesting sociological issue. I'm gonna open the floor up.
Yeah, well, okay. So before I jump into Just Squared, we do have a sequence of comments from the Twitch chat. He was mentioning about why do we need Starlink if I believe he's trying to say that the United States is just peddling propaganda, and so why?
I didn't hear you there. You kind of broke up.
Oh, it's a little bit disjointed. So, the Twitch user, the Mr. Rumble, if you want to join the conversation over on Twitter Spaces, you are more than welcome to present your argument. Otherwise than that, could you make your statement a little more concise? Because it's a little discombobulated. So, but I'll let Jess go, and then hopefully he'll rephrase.
Well, I was just going to talk about what stuck out to me is how similar their issues are to the issues that we experience with the younger generation, right? A lot of the younger people in America have access to pornography and all these things at a very, very young age, and they are displaying behaviors that would be entirely unacceptable in previous generations, even in the millennial generation, and even older Gen Zs, like the Gen Z generation, these alpha kids, they're even like the Gen Alpha, I believe it's called Gen Alpha. These kids have gone like way further in a lot of ways because they have this access to all this stuff. And it also the comments about making them lazier. Yes, you see that people become lazier. These problems, interestingly, are the same problems we have, even though we have had that gradual experience of stepping into this slowly. That didn't really occur for a younger generation. They just were born and the internet was a thing, right? They never actually got that gradual, step into the kiddie pool before you go into the actual, ocean or whatever, that the millennial generation got. I think that weirdly, the millennial generation has been more blessed, as opposed to these, later generations, because of the fact that we had that gradual influence or gradual step, because If you think about it like that, that's what's happening in these younger generations. They're becoming lazier. And in fact, you would think they would get more information, but they're getting less informed in a lot of ways because they want these shorter videos. They want small bite-sized information. And I wonder with these people, with these traditional, I wonder if they're also having the same issue with attention span, etc. Because, when you look at pornography, how does it change their view of women, etc.? There's so many factors here that I think would be very fascinating to see. But yes, I think that there are the same problems that the Gen Alpha is experiencing.
Yeah,
my husband, there are kids who try to take pictures of other kids in bathroom stalls while they're going to the bathroom. There are boys displaying like sexual behaviors towards other boys in schools. There are just really gross behaviors. There was this thing like devious licks was a thing, I don't know, a couple of years ago, where they would go in and they would destroy public school bathrooms for TikTok, etc. Like these things are just, like in our generation, that kind of stuff wasn't really a thing because we were like, no, we didn't really grow up with it, so we weren't obsessed with it. And so I think that those are the very same issues.
Some of it was a thing. People just didn't get clout for it. They just got expelled.
well, yeah, and there was a lot more emphasis on punishment, and that has a lot to do with generational gaps and how our parents have punished individuals and how many parents will now essentially allow their children to get away with anything because they want to be seen as friends to their children and not parents that encourage upright and moral and righteous behavior. They want to be liked and they want to be appreciated, and so they say anything goes. And then when these kids get to school, then they become absolute hooligans, and you have issues similar to the high school near my house, where they have to hire 3 extra security guards just for the high school lunch hour. Because vandalism and because shoplifting is so prevalent, and they'll kick these teenagers out, and they'll walk around the building and come back inside. And I was overhearing a conversation where there were these individuals or these security guards were saying, "I've already kicked that person out twice today." Like, these are the
of sorry. So here's my question. No, I mean, I understand, but like in our era, like in millennial generation, think of when we were middle school. Did we have to have like the doors removed from our bathrooms so that they could make sure that we weren't having, sexual relations in the stalls? I mean, my middle school was pretty crazy. Like girls did not go to the bathroom alone at my middle school, that kind of thing. But if like a normal middle school that wasn't like what mine was, like my husband, for example, he told, like when I told him like, oh, like it was pretty normal, just don't go to the bathroom alone because normal middle schools, I can't even imagine like having so my husband has talked about this. They do not have the door on a lot of these schools. They don't have the door on the actual bathroom. They have the stalls are still there, but the door isn't there because the teachers need to be able to see into the bathroom to see that there aren't 4 legs in the stalls, for example. So they got to be able to see what's going on to make sure that there isn't any dangerous things or sexual things going on in the bathrooms. Like that wasn't a thing in our generation, and a lot of it is because they have access to a lot of this stuff way too early.
Oh, I
and it's the same kind of thing that this tribe is experiencing, right? They have new access to things that they didn't have access to before, and I wonder if that's leading, and it leads to these types of behaviors, right?
There is some of that, but like when I was growing up, there was a few middle schoolers that got pregnant and everything. It wasn't unheard of. Let's go ahead and go to Tim here.
My take on it's just a little bit different. I think it's fascinating in one regard in that it's a display of unbridled human nature, right?
Mhm.
If you take people that haven't been exposed to really society or any of the norms that societies have developed over a long period of time, bad things start to happen. So I mean, it really goes straight to the nature of the species, and where I kind of extrapolated out to with like present day problems that we're having here in this country is over the course of really the last couple thousand years, society developed pretty good guardrails so that some of these behaviors stayed out of things. And in particular, we had those in Western civilization. And what's been happening is, really kind of not starting, but reaching a crescendo in the late 60s, it became very socially important to tear down a lot of those societal guardrails. And I think technology plays a role, but bad behavior is pretty well documented throughout history. I mean, it's obviously, I think, makes a lot of things more available or pervasive than they were in the past. But bad behaviors existed for a long time. And I think it really speaks more to perhaps re-examining whether some of those social guardrails we used to have that we tore down, maybe they played a pretty big role that we might want to revisit a little bit. But that's just kind of how I see it.
All right. I'm gonna before I get to you, Nickel and Dime. I tried to address and make the question from the chat more succinct. So essentially, what they were trying to ask is that why would it be necessary to bring Starlink to a culture and society such as this when American disinformation and propaganda is so prevalent? And my answer to that sort of question is yes. Like, you can find almost anything on the internet. You can find information that supports your notions, information that goes against your notions. And a culture like this would have no key understanding or no grasp or concept of how to filter through and how to understand how to perform research in terms of seeing which information is true and which information is not. But to say that we should simply block off internet access, especially information from other countries, because, the information coming from that country, it's all propaganda, so we should just cut off the flow of information from there. They're trying to do that in Canada. I myself, and those who are listening to the space, everybody knows that I am a Canadian, and I am impacted by laws that we have here in my country where we cannot post and we cannot share content and information.
Hold on. Isn't that like Bill C11 or I saw a video about that TikTok actually.
Yes,
That's
that is. It was
Shrewd is talking.
You know what? It was he was trying to ask, so he wasn't trying to interrupt that much. So it's okay. But yes, it is Bill C11, where we cannot share news stories and we cannot share information of any kind on social media. Twitter is an exception because Elon has essentially told the Canadian government to go hump a stump in that regard. And that's great. We can share news content, we can share information as much as our heart desires on Twitter, but when it comes to other social media platforms, we get this little message saying this content cannot be shared by order of the Canadian government. And when you block the flow of information, especially from certain sources, then it is not the people who are doing their own research, it is not the ability of the citizens to be able to determine what is true and what is false. It is entirely up to the government. And if the government decides what is true and what is false, then they can brainwash and they can propagandize the people immensely easily, insanely easily. And I don't see a rationale, and I don't understand a reasoning why somebody would be behind this. I know that propaganda and misinformation is everywhere. We saw it over the past 4 years through COVID. We saw it over the past few years through the Ukrainian war and what's been going on in Israel and all the stuff regarding the primaries and the presidential election season. But with the current information age, with the current internet age that we live in, it is a necessary skill in society that we are able to discern, to be able to tell what is true and what is false by looking at the context, by looking at other sources that might confirm this. Now, a tribe in the Amazon would not be able to do this, but to completely cut off people from information it's wicked. I do not want to stop people or encourage people from being prevented to access information because certain governments might not like it.
A question I would have there is why talk about just the American propaganda and disinformation? Russia does it, China does it, every single country on the world does it. Why is it only American that you're worried about?
That is a relevant question, and maybe that'll be answered in the chat soon. But was it Tim and then Nickel and Dime? I believe so. I think Tim had his hand raised, and then when I tried to answer the question from the chat, then that got interrupted.
I already talked. I don't know if anybody heard me, but I talked.
Okay, then it's Nickel and Dime. And then I think after Nickel and Dime, then we're going to shut down the video live stream, and then people can talk about whatever they want to until we shut down the space for good.
So we're talking about, should indigenous people be connected to the internet, and whether or not that's a good thing. Is that
in essence, like the case study that was visible about this tribe in the Amazon and how it instantly affected their entire culture?
Well, interestingly, I saw a documentary about a Amazon tribe a long time ago, and they talked about, they were very open with their sexuality. They would just hook up. I mean, they had their own hookup culture.
Mm-hmm.
They would go out in threesomes and just fuck in the woods. And they said it wasn't until white people came around that introduced them the idea of Christianity and monogamy and all this other stuff. And then that's when it caused problems within the tribe, because people would start getting jealous and possessive of each other, because they would say, that's my woman and this is mine and this is yours. So I think humanity as a whole already has a very strong sex drive, because when you think about uh, the original flood story that the Sumerians talked about, it was the humans were just overpopulating, and they really used the flood to just cull us out and start over again. So, I mean, sexuality and humanity go hand in hand, and I think pornography is just an element of that. Does it lead with moral decay? Yes, because it snowballs in its depravity. It gets more and more depraved until you get to the snuff film stuff. But I think that there's always an undercurrent and an underlying, I guess you could say, I don't know what you want to say. What would you call it? Temptations, or proclivities that humanity has in that regard. And it's not a surprise at all to me that they would go directly to the porno, especially when all you got to do is turn off the safe search on your browser. So, good faith you didn't hear that.
Nah, I mean, I don't do that. I find it that it's
You already
actually
knew
brain
that anyway.
slavery. Yeah, I don't do that. But I know lots of people my age do that. Especially, I saw a study that showed that 95% of young men these days watch porn every single month, and that's a horrible statistic. And that just shows the direction we're going in as a society. I think
Every
that's
month,
just,
probably every day, right?
I mean,
Yeah, I'd say every month is a little.
well, no, it was 95% every month, and I believe around 80% or something of that sort every day.
Okay, all right, I can see that.
But I mean, it's just sad.
Yeah, I was potentially trying to look up that stat, but that's okay. We don't have to look that up right now. But
I can definitely understand it. Like, I can definitely see that as being probably pretty darn accurate. I'm not even questioning that stat. I mean, kids, especially today, it's way more available. It's more available. You know, when I was a kid, even the early days of the internet, if you wanted to look at a picture of a flower, it took like 10 minutes for it to load, right? People had to actually go and bribe someone at the gas station to buy a magazine or do things like that for it to be more available, or steal from a friend's parent or something like that. But nowadays, it's at your fingertips, literally. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me one bit, the statistics that Good Faith was talking about.
Well, and of course, when Nickel and Dime is talking about the innate kind of natural elements of human sexuality and the sexual impulses that we face, this is something which is intrinsic to our nature as human beings. Yes. But just because something is intrinsic to our nature as human beings, I would definitely say that simply because something is natural, that does not, by any stretch of the imagination, say that it is good for us. Like you were referencing that there were tribes in Africa, I believe it was saying. You were saying that they were devoid of Western sexual mores and sexual morality, and so they treated sex as something which was interchangeable, which many in society want. They want sex to be treated this way. They want the sexual event and intercourse and lovemaking to be something which is not simply restricted to committed relationships and family units. And I just, whenever I see that, whenever I see someone try and take away the moral structure around sex, it takes away so much of what sexuality is meant to be. And I understand that they had their own interpretation of human sexuality, but if we compare, I really doubt that if we took their culture and our culture in regards to how we treat sex, that they would have a healthier view than like Judeo-Christian Western moral framework on sexuality. But you at this point in time, Nickel and Dime, you don't need to. So before you answer, I'm just going to shut down the video live stream, and then we can have a back and forth to your heart's content on this issue.